How damaging is just that rhetoric, even if it never comes to fruition?
Well, I think after 4 years of President Trump, everybody sort of recognizes that rhetoric. But unfortunately, behind that rhetoric, there is some logic. NATO is candidly been freeloading off the United States for years and years, and every president since Eisenhower has said the same thing.
Not that you would allow one of our allies to fall prey to a Russian invasion, though. That's a separate conversation, is it not?
Well, it is, but it's also the fact that President Trump then and future President Trump, if that happens, can't pull us out of NATO. So it's quite simply that he doesn't have that choice. Plus, there are already about 50,000 American troops over there. What, he's not going to come to their rescue? Ridiculous.
Well, you say that he wouldn't have the choice to pull out of NATO. Obviously, there has been actual legislation that has passed that would make it a congressional act necessarily to do so. But couldn't he, as commander-in-chief, theoretically give the order for troops not to go or not order them to go if the articles of NATO were actually to be invoked, if a country like Poland or one of the Baltic states actually were invaded by Russia? He could just not send them, even if he was still in NATO, right?
But let's get back to the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue that President Trump continues to refer to as a businessman is, as he would say, we're being taken for suckers. The combined GDP of 31 nations in NATO is $1.2 billion, not the GDP, but the defense budget, $1.2 billion. Of which the United States pays $800 billion of that. So 30 nations pay $4, we pay $8. So I think there is an issue with regards to how much is the fair balance between what we pay and what others should pay, and are, in fact, our NATO allies free riders on the United States defense budget. That's the point he's making, even if it is somewhat inelegant as it has been in the past.
Well, if you take him at face value, I'm not sure you do based on your answer, and a lot of people might question whether he ever said that to begin with, as he's kind of, in a room there where he might be showing off in front of supporters. But Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, said it, and was very upset about this for obvious reasons in a statement. Any suggestion allies will not defend each other undermines all of our security, including that of the U.S. That is true, isn't it?
Well, again, it's a suggestion. It's a hypothetical. It is the campaign season. We all say odd things during a campaign season. Joe Biden last time said Mohammed bin Salman was a murderer, and now they're having a bromance.
Oh, it's amazing how things can change.
It's amazing how things can change.
What's Joe Biden's line? He believes in conversion. But as far as what Stoltenberg said, the U.S. does rely on its NATO allies for security. No?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we would not be able to support Ukraine without our NATO allies. I spent 10 years of my Army career overseas in a NATO function of one kind or the other. We certainly recognize the great contributions of those 30 other countries. But as a businessman, Donald Trump doesn't like to be, as he would say, gypped. And he just feels like they're not living up to their commitments. And candidly, every president since Eisenhower has said the same thing.
Well, you say also that a lot of this is just down to campaign rhetoric, but that would mean that this messaging actually appeals to voters. Do you think that this is reflective of a United States as an electorate that is becoming more isolationist? And what does that mean about the future world order?
No, I think that's a good point. Yes, Americans, by and large, are becoming more isolationist. But at the same time, when you appeal to pocketbook issues, then it really strikes home. And that's what he is doing in this case, that somehow, why do we have to bear the burdens when those great social welfare systems in Europe have universal health care, but we're still struggling with our own health care systems? Imagine if we only paid $400 billion and they paid $400 billion. That $400 billion savings in our defense budget could go pretty far to universal health care.
General, we have to ask you about what's happening in Israel and Gaza right now.
Thank you.
Airstrikes move to the south, to Rafah, and some very new levels of concern, I guess you could say, inside the administration about potential civilian casualties. Dozens of civilians have already died. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke on Sunday morning about their efforts in southern Gaza. I'd like to listen to what he said and have you respond. Here he is.
Those who say that under no circumstances should we enter Rafah are basically saying lose the war. keep Hamas there. Victory is within reach. It has to be understood. And victory will be the best thing that will happen, not only for Israel, but for the Palestinians themselves. I can't see a future for the Palestinians or for peace in the Middle East if Hamas is victorious.
The concern here is, of course, so many civilians have fled to that area as strikes were contained largely to the north before. President Biden says Israel should not push into Rafah without a credible and executable plan for the safety of civilians. Does such a thing exist?
Well, that's exactly what the Israeli military has been tasked to come up with. The question is, will Prime Minister Netanyahu give the military time to not only set up that plan, but execute it? And it's not just about getting 1.2 million people out of Rafah. It's also making sure they have somewhere to go, they have shelter, they have water, they have food. And if that is done, it will delay this attack considerably. If it is not done, I can tell you as a military officer, I wouldn't want to be putting my troops in the middle of Rafah with 1.2 million people in an area that one-third the size of Manhattan. Can you imagine trying to fight in that kind of environment? Impossible.
We have less than a minute left, but do you see Rafah as key to Israel's ability to win this war against Hamas, whatever winning means?
Winning is, as Prime Minister Netanyahu has said, the defeat of Hamas, the destruction of its terrorist infrastructure, the return of the hostages. I don't know about the third issue, but if you don't take Rafah, you don't defeat Hamas, you don't destroy the terrorist infrastructure.